All right, guys, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first organizational meeting of the year. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ballard?
Here.
Ms. Nazario?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Sturgill?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the very first thing we need to do is give the oath of office to Mrs. Nazario.
You solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as board member of the Board of Education of Lorain City School District, Lorain County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified.
Thank you. Of course, we had to do that because she completed the office, the term of our former Tony Demakia, so this is now officially her term. Welcome aboard. Again, there you go. Number 5 is our nomination of election for our president. Is there any nomination for president?
I'd like to nominate Mark Ballard for president.
Second.
Is there any other nominations?
Motion that we close nominations.
Nomination? Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Yes.
Were you first? Okay. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
So we have one nominee for president, that's Mark Ballard. I guess we need a roll call on that as well?
Yep. Bill nominated. I support it, so Bill's first.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Abstain.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
And Ms. Johnson?
Yes. You have to state your reason for abstaining.
You're silly. Thank you. So we're all covered on that. Declaration of President. So now it's my turn for my oath.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Board President of the Board of Education of the Lorain City School District, Lorain County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do. Thank you.
Yes, sir, right here.
Need a nomination of an election of a vice president.
I would offer to nominate Bill Sturgill.
I second.
Is there any other nominees? We will now close the nomination. Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
And now we need a nomination to vote for Bill and support it.
Yeah.
Roll call?
You were first. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Declaration of Bill as a vice. I guess you need to take your oath, sir.
Okay. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Board Vice President of the Board of Education of Lorain City School District, Lorain County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? This one right here.
Thank you, Bill. So our next item is for our fixed day and time for our board meetings. Right now, we're meeting Mondays at 5. I guess we would need a,
Motion that we fix the time and date of the board meeting as written into the schedule, the first and fourth Mondays,
second and fourth.
second and fourth Mondays,
Yes.
here
At 5.
at 5 p.m.
Support?
Discussion.
Do we have a discussion?
Just for the record, the Lorain City Council meetings occur on the first and third Mondays of every month, and I'm not absolutely required to attend, but I believe I should be there, and I do attend. So in order to be at this meeting, if they were not scheduled on the second and fourth, I'd have difficulty being here. So I would appreciate that the meetings be set on the second and fourth Mondays of the month.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
I'm trying to understand the authorization of notifications. I'm sorry, before we go there, tape and television, regular board meetings, I guess we need a motion, an action, that we want our meetings taped.
Yes. Take the motion to table.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
And our current business and procedures, recommended they remain the same. You get a motion for that?
So moved.
Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
9.02, authorization to issue warrants, et cetera. Motion?
Motion to approve as stated.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
9.03, the adopt order of business. It's been the same. I guess we're leaving our lineup the same as it's always been, so I need a motion for that, please.
Motion to keep the same.
Support.
Roll call?
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Number 10, set board members' compensation. I think we should have some discussion about that for sure.
That's the state minimum.
That's going to stay the same. We have a motion for that, please?
Yes.
Support.
Roll call?
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson? Oh, sorry, Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
11, a resolution establishing service fund for 2020. Very-
Motion to approve.
Support.
Thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Number 12, payment of OSBA annual membership fund and other board expenditures, set at $20,000 for the year. Need a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Appointments. Is that for, who's that appointment for? Representation for grants? Need a motion?
Yes.
I motion that we change the word from superintendent to CEO. So the change of,
Okay, mine has CEO.
is mine also.
You know, that's the purchasing agent, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're all right.
So to language specifically to state the CEO or his designee.
Okay. Motion, please?
This
To
is a
change
motion on
language?
language.
Support.
Roll call?
Which one do you want to support? Okay. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Staying on 13.02, purchasing agent. Need a motion?
Motion to approve?
support,
Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
13.03, legal counsel.
I motion that we appoint Mr. Giardini to be the board's general counsel and to continue services with the Lorain City School, or Lorain City of Lorain.
support,
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Participation in grants. Need a motion?
Support.
Motion.
Got it. Roll call.
Okay. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Authorization of the treasurer, investment of funds. Need a motion?
so moved,
Support?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
1502, request for available monies. Need a motion?
Motion.
Support?
Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Was that 03 or was that 02? Was 03.
That was 02.
1503, petty cash. Need a motion?
so moved,
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Need a motion to adopt the change fund, 1504.
Motion?
support,
Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
1601, payment of educational costs of the superintendent. Need a motion?
Again, I would suggest that we modify the language again to express CEO or designate.
Okay. Support? Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
I need a motion to accept the change, with the change language for 1601 to pass. Motion?
Motion.
Support?
Roll call.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Again, in this same category, 1602, authorization to accept the resignations.
so moved,
Support.
For time saving, I wish I would, can we make a general motion to wherever it says superintendent to replace that with CEO?
You'd wait till the last one.
Well, you know, I wasn't smart enough to read ahead. Sorry. Good idea, kind of late, right?
You could change them all back to superintendent, too, if you want to start all over again.
Say,
Let's just do the single one, sorry.
yes, motion is support.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Okay, with Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
1603, hiring of staff with the CEO. That's in there, brother. Need a motion, please?
so moved,
Support, please.
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Sturgill?
yes,
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
So the next one is number 17, the Bond Issue Oversight Committee. Some of the names I'm not familiar with, and I think this has been going on since our building project, I believe. So would it be proper for us to just leave the people who are already on there?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Giardini. I'm not sure I know what the Bond Issue Oversight Committee really does or functions.
Yeah, while the schools were still being built and while the bond funds were still being spent, their job was to make sure that the bond funds were being spent in accordance with the levy that passed them. At this stage, and I'm open to being corrected, but at this stage, I believe that all the money has been spent that needs to be spent, that there's, I think, probably still some money left in the bond fund. So probably technically you still need to have an oversight committee until the remaining funds have been properly disposed of, spent, or what have you.
Might suggest that you give Tony and I an opportunity to check with bond counsel as well as to whether or not the committee needs to remain in place until the bonds are otherwise paid or in some portion paid. So I'd ask you to give us an opportunity to at least look at the bond issue and determine whether or not a committee overseeing the bonds needs to be and remain in place.
So should I table 17 until a future meeting?
I don't know how I got removed, but apparently I am. So, I mean, I used to be part of that.
Okay.
So we will table 17 until our next meeting, until we can do that research. That's-
Yeah,
And
makes
since we're in
sense.
discussion, if we could also, during that time, perhaps look at the committee members, if it's going to be someone active, contact them. Some of them may be deceased, I think, maybe,
They were, yeah.
so that we can at least, because we're going to come back to our other committees also.
Okay.
I think.
Martha Smith was the chair of it.
Okay, so we will table that until a future meeting. We'll get follow-up from our legal counsel.
Do you have to have a motion to table?
I would say
Through the chair.
yes.
So we're going to table the next two to be thorough with you. It's going to be 17 and 18, because we're not going to make committee appointments tonight.
Motion to table items number 17 and 18.
So moved.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
That completes the organizational meeting. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Support.
Roll call.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes,
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
meeting is adjourned.
Fastest meeting you missed it by 4 minutes.
It was about 4 minutes.
I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for January the 13th. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you. We don't need another pledge, do we? So we'll go right into the recognition of visitors. All very familiar faces around the table, so welcome, except for Mr. Rain. It's good to have a superintendent/CEO back at the table. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Miller as well.
And Mr. Miller is here, yes. Good to see you, Mr. Miller, our state representative. It's always good to have you here, and I'm sure there's an update coming from you before the day is over, so welcome. We have number 5, our first hearing of the public.
Give me some time to figure.
Good evening, folks. I'm Jay Pickering. I'm the president of Lorain Education Association. I represent the teachers here in Lorain. And I will say it's refreshing to come and speak at one of these when there's people at the table that can answer questions finally. What has it been, almost 3 years now since we've had somebody in charge of the district at this table. But I would like to I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the recent state review that got released. I'm not sure how many people have seen it. It's 89 pages long. And if you recall last spring, a state review team came in from, was it April 22nd to April 25th? And I can tell you that previously, when we were under Academic Distress Commission for the 4 years before House Bill 70, they came in every year and did a review. And some of the faces were familiar from those previous years. But this was the first one I think they did since the CEO was here. And the first thing is, I think they definitely support the idea that there needed to be a change. If you read the report, there needs a change in leadership here is warranted for certain. It's long, it's, as you look through it, there's a lot of little intricacies here and there, but a lot of very negative comments about the way things were being run. But I just want to point out two items in here. One thing they did was they took a look at the Lorain Promise. And they have a 25-page review of the Lorain Promise. And I will tell you, when I first saw the promise, I said, well, how can anybody argue with it? It's like world peace. It hit every item that you would want for education and said we should do it. But I always said from the beginning, I don't see a plan inside this promise. And I was kind of relieved when some people took a look at it that had some educational background, and I think they kind of came to the same conclusion. I mean, I think the district paid well over $100,000 for the creation of the promise way back when it was. And the way they went through this was they looked at all the commitments. There were 5 commitments, and there were 3 strategies at every commitment. So it's a total of 15 strategies. And in their comments about each of those strategies, out of the 15, 12 of them were very negative and questioning the plan. I'll just read you the one. Early on it says, the strategies on focus on providing resources our scholars need to be healthy and present every day. And their review of it said the Lorain Promise states the district has identified resources needed for scholars to be successful. However, the Lorain Promise lacks baseline information on current resources and how they are being used. The plan also lacks specific and measurable goals, action steps, and incremental data points for reaching those targets. As you look through this, nearly every strategy has the same comment. There's no strategy, there's no goals, there's no incremental points. There's no way to measure whether this promise is actually being done. And I think we all noticed that at the very beginning. So I guess I only bring that up because if anybody thinks that the promise is worth continuing in the form it is, we need more specifics, because this thing is just a statement of a whole bunch of stuff that nobody could argue with. Yeah. The other piece I noted in here too, on page 18, so if you take a look at it on page 18, they talk about $1 million being spent. And when I read this, I thought to myself, I've been paying pretty close attention to everything that's been going on here. I don't remember them talking about spending $1 million for something. And I will read it to you and then explain. It says, at the time of the review, the district had not created a district assessment literacy advisory board. Apparently that was something that was supposed to be done. Interviews with the district administration showed the district chose to purchase Achievement Network, a system of assessment tools and support to help it create a district assessment literacy advisory board. The district received $1 million in matching funds from the Achievement Network's Breakthrough Results Fund for a 4-year partnership with the organization to improve assessment and instruction. My understanding of matching funds is you don't get them unless you match them, which in my mind says this district gave Achievement Network $1 million. And then Achievement Network apparently charged them $2 million and gave them $1 million back or something. You can figure this one out. But knowing that prior to Christmas, you authorized legal counsel to look into contracts entered into by the CEO, I think that's one I'm very curious about. And maybe the district or the state review team has it wrong, but to me it sounds like they spent $1 million. And it's a 4-year deal. So we haven't finished the 4 years. So I certainly want to keep, several $100,000 still in this district if this is not a system that we should be involved in. So I just wanted to point out those 2 items. There's a lot here, and it takes a long time to read those 89 pages. But I just thought I'd like to make you folks aware of those 2 items from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, got all this stuff.
There's no pen here. We have a pen? Thank you. Good evening. My name is Julie Garcia, and I live in Lorain. I also teach in Lorain. This is year 30 for me. But I do want to ask if anybody can help us out with this. We received an email from Mr. Scott Dieter. It says, introducing Haggerty. In response to feedback from teachers and leaders that Foundations does not adequately address phonemic awareness skills, we will be purchasing the Haggerty program for all pre-K 2 teachers. And it goes on to talk about the curriculum is specifically designed to supplement students' phonemic awareness and can be taught in 10 minutes per day, even during transitions or bathroom time. Teachers can expect to receive their Haggerty manual in February, and they will receive Haggerty training from the ESC during February 11th PD Day. The teachers in my building have no idea what this is about. There's teachers back here I'm talking to, they have no idea what this is about. I kind of think that Mr. Dieter is being disingenuous, and he's saying that he spoke to us. We like foundations. We've been doing foundations for 6 years. We've been adequately trained in foundations. And now it's February, and you're going to throw a new curriculum at us to tell us to sing and do all kinds of different things in the bathroom line. I mean, it's just kind of, it's startling that now we're going to get a curriculum that nobody had any say-so. Nobody's done any PD. A preschool teacher, I take that back, went to and saw it and mentioned to their principal that they liked it. And so now you're going to buy it for the entire district, and we know nothing about it. So we would just like to know, what's going on with this program? Are we getting it? Are we expected to implement it in place of our foundations program? Is it in addition to Wit and Wisdom? So can somebody answer a question, or are you able to?
I had my first building visit today and was at Dehanis, and it came up there because obviously the email coming out, there are a lot of questions around it. As it probably says in the email, which I also had an opportunity to see, it seems that Wit and Wisdom has a hole in it in terms of phonemic awareness and being able to teach phonics, and that this would be a supplemental program that would go along with it to help fill that gap, was my understanding. I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Dieter. I'm sure I will be. And we'll try to find out what's going on there. But in my meeting today with the staff, especially kindergarten, I think it was, had the same concerns that you had. So we'll look into it. We'll see what's going on with that, and see if there's if this is the best solution or there's a better solution. But I agree with you. I think any time that you make any kind of an adoption of materials or things that you're asking teachers to do, teachers need to have a say. They'd be able to chime in and say, is this a supplement that we need for this program or not? And I don't know how much interaction has happened with staff, perhaps very little, I'm not sure. But it was one of the things that ended up on my list today as I walked out of Dehanis, and we'll look into it.
We appreciate that. And I will add that Wit and Wisdom has a lot of learning for the teachers as well as the students. And to add another new layer on top of that is just asking a lot of us. I mean, we're going to buck up and we're going to do it, but it gets to be a lot. So, but we appreciate your looking into it for us.
I guess I have a question. Was it purchased? Do we know if so it was already purchased, or we don't know that?
I'm not sure of that. I don't know.
You have to look and see it. I mean, because really, he wasn't supposed to purchase anything, correct? At that ADC meeting, he was told he wasn't allowed to enter into any contracts. That would be a contract, right?
And I've been kind of keeping track of what was purchased prior to, like, in November, and I don't recall seeing that
No.
listed.
Right.
So I would think it's not been purchased yet, but I think it's something we definitely need to look into and figure out how to move forward with it.
But it's an add-on to the program that we already have, is my understanding.
It's a supplemental.
It's an
it's a
add-on
supplement.
module kind of a thing.
And then she mentioned, or someone mentioned Wit and Wisdom, but then there was foundations mentioned as well. And from what I understand, there's an inconsistency across the board, and until we get some consistency in place, to just keep putting layers on top of layers and adding new things in, we're going to have to be careful with that. And that's just my opinion.
Happy New Year to all of you. Bambi Dillon, citizen for Lorain Schools and also citizen of Lorain. I hear all this about, was this purchased, was that purchased, was that paid for, was this paid for? I want to know, no one knows. I bet no one in this district knows what we paid for, what we haven't. I want to know, are we having an audit of the books? So we know exactly where our money went to and who calls for the audit. I think we're starting all over. It's a new beginning for us. We have a new interim CEO. We have an interim treasurer. Before we get a permanent, I would hope that everything's in order so they could start off fresh and not have anything that they have to go back at or in turmoil with. I'd like to know that.
So we've not called for an audit yet, but I will let you know that I've been in almost daily communication with the treasurer's office trying to get some semblance of what's going on. And Greg and Tia are working closely together. So we're not at the point yet of saying, yep, the audit starts on such and such a day, but we're trying to get an understanding. As she heard this conversation today, she says, I will look into that. So we'll get those answers and we will move forward and try to make sure that.
Okay.
But I can't give you a date at this point.
I want to know whose responsibility. You have the distress committee still in place, you have the school board still in place, and you have an interim CEO in place. You have an interim treasurer in place. Who is responsible for asking for the audit? Does it come from the distress committee since they're still in place? I mean, who is really?
The state of Ohio requires an audit every year. They're not in yet. They will be in. I'm sure Tia can speak to this better than I could. But the state auditor's office comes in and does a very thorough, lengthy review of the books. That's done on an annual basis. That will be done this year. And we look for that to commence at any time. I don't know, Tia, have you heard when or anything?
We don't have an exact date yet.
So an audit is coming. The state will come in and audit the books, and we'll do a public report, which you certainly will have the opportunity to review.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. Okay.
Real quick, Summer Harvey, East Skyline Drive. Well, the audit that you're referencing, is that just like a legal audit? Like, okay, they legally spent the money where they were allowed to, that kind of thing? Or is that going to itemize for us as a tax-paying body where the money went? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is it just, okay, they follow the law, you're not going to get arrested kind of thing? Or is it actually going to break down where the money went, where it was supposed to, you know what I mean? Like, things that we need to know that has nothing to do with how illegal the operation was.
It probably is more along those legal,
Right.
In terms of looking specifically. Probably the best thing to do is to submit your questions to us. If there's something, specifically that you have a concern about in terms of curriculum or, some service that was purchased, just drop Tia or drop me a line. Send us an email. We'll follow up on that for you. And any specific questions really that any of you would have, we'll do the best we can to follow up if you have questions on something specific. Those things are all public record, all of those expenditures. There's a lot, so we need to have a little specificity in terms of what to look for and so forth. But if you have some questions and things specifically that you want some answers to, we'll do our best to get those to you as quickly as we can.
And I'll add to that. At our last meeting, we authorized our legal team to go in and specifically look at contracts back to a certain date. So we will know when those contracts were, signed. If they've been paid, that will all come out in that flush.
There will be a public report, you're saying?
We will know then, and then it becomes public record once we know.
I mean, that's great that it's public record, but if we don't know the questions to ask, how do we know to ask them? Like how Jay just brought up, there was $1 million possibly spent. Nobody would know to ask, was there $1 million spent somewhere if that information hadn't been brought up in a different arena? Do you get what I'm saying? So it's like, I appreciate the fact that you're offering for me or whoever to ask a specific question and receive an answer, because that's a breath of fresh air. But maybe we don't know the questions to ask, and that was why I think an audit of, like an internal audit, is important to be able to report to the public what the money, our money over the past however many years was spent on. Is that not?
I think we all are interested in some of the same findings that you're referring to, and those are the same, and we've already authorized our people to do that. So I'm not sure if we will have a forum like this to talk about it. I'm sorry, My legal team is going to take over from me.
I'm not sure I can answer this question, but through the chair, at the city of Lorain, where I deal most of the time, there is an annual state audit. And that audit issues at the time that it's issued, a set of findings of actions that may not have been proper. Now, I don't know whether the school state audit results in a set of findings being issued that would alert the public as to what may or may not have been done correctly, but I'm going to suggest to you that that's likely the case. And so you wouldn't really, if you wanted to know what may have been done that was not appropriate, incorrect, unlawful, you might anticipate those being announced to you through the audit report itself.
Well, the unfortunate thing about that answer is not every purchase or move that was made from our previous CEO was technically illegal. While it may have been immoral, while it may have been irresponsible, it may very well not have been illegal. So I don't see that any of that information, being flagged on a state audit level. That's why I thought we were going to do an internal audit to get line items of what has been spent.
Through the chair.
Hey, please.
Yeah, I think the question you're asking is, was it wise to make a certain expenditure as opposed to were the proper procedures followed in making the expenditure?
Or what even was the expenditure? I mean, I guess it's objective whether you find it wise or not, but we don't even know what was spent on what.
Right. So the state audit, much like the city's audit, will first look at the budget that was established by the district. They'll audit to make sure that the district received all the income it was supposed to get. And then they'll look at individual contracts or vendors who were paid to make sure that those vendors were paid in accordance with their contract, or the employees were paid in accordance with their contract. It could be union negotiated contracts, it could be individual contracts. They will sometimes get into things beyond just that if they think that there was a waste of money or it's obvious something was inappropriate. One thing that comes to my mind is this $1 million matching fund. They may find something there that they think was good or bad or inappropriate or whatever, and they'll comment. They'll make comments about those kinds of things. But they're not going to say, gee, you spent $100,000 on wit and wisdom and you could have gotten some other program for $75,000. They're not going to do something like that. Or the wit and wisdom program is a good program or a bad program. That's actually, no audit does that. What you're really talking about is something that goes to policy. Is that a good policy or bad policy from your point of view or from somebody else's point of view?
Or even if it's not just for me to decide, and I mean me as the public or whoever to decide, it's still information I think is useful for people to have, and while I think the community is taking a big look at our government as a whole and knowing that we need to be a lot more involved, otherwise things like this, creep up on you, I guess. Like I said, it's useful to have that information available. If it had not been surfaced that we purchased Wit and Wisdom, even fairly recently, I would say, we may not know to even question the fact that there was just possibly another curriculum purchased. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, so if there isn't an audit that exists in that manner, why? Why is there not a way for us as taxpayers to know where the money is going without having to ask a specific question because we may not know to ask that question?
Through the chair, actually, you do have that. You can see the list of expenditures by category and sometimes pretty specifically just by looking at the books of the district.
Okay.
The purpose of the audit is to say whether or not that expenditure in that category was done appropriately. And that's what the audit does. So, in other words, if you budget $30 million for teacher salaries, the audit's purpose is to make sure that $30 million went to teachers and for their salaries, not whether or not the teacher was paid enough or not paid enough. It's just did the $30 million go there?
I mean, I hate to be so cynical, but we just were duped for a long time. And just for an example, the Title I funds, yeah, they were allocated legally, but was that what was right for our district? And we would not have known to ask that question. You know what I'm saying?
And our monthly financials are posted on the website, so all of those line items are there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark. Through the chair to our interim treasurer, I would like a copy of the contract that was referred to by Mr. Pickering, this grant,
Achievement first, matching
whatever that
funds.
might be. If you can
Okay.
send it to me, we'll put that in our contract review process.
Okay,
I just have one more question.
okay.
How are we gonna know what's right or wrong when, the way I understood from all you people for 3 years is he had carte blanche. He could do whatever he wants because the state allowed him.
That is absolutely
So
accurate.
then how would we know? How could he be blamed for anything when he was allowed to do anything?
That's a good point. I mean, we can't rewrite House Bill 70. We can change it,
But you can change it.
but we
It
can
takes an
change it.
awful long time.
And that is our goal.
I
Thank-
mean, it took, how many days to get HB 70 in, and now how many days to get it out?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. We gotta do some more stomping in Columbus.
I
We
agree.
need more bus trips there.
They're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Hello, Barbie Washington. Welcome, Mr. Ring. Thank you for being here. It is a sigh of relief that we have some collaboration, true collaboration going on. A couple questions. The website, we do have a new Lorain City Schools website, and there is a lot of information missing. You will go to, say, an email sent from the district, and there'll be a link in there. You click the link and you get an error. Where and why? I would like to know.
I asked about that, and I think, and maybe you've heard this answer too, that it's a Google problem. I don't know, Barbie, if it is or not, but what I was told that it was a connectivity problem that was outside Lorain's control.
Perhaps, I mean, I don't know too much about it. I think we really need to look into it. But it's not just if you Google, something. I guess if you go to Google and they send you to an error, perhaps. But if you're going to something from the district itself and you click on that link, it's going to an error. So what would Google, how does that come into it?
Google has nothing to do with it. It's a link, it's a connection, and it's not working.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I would like to ask about graduation. We've had a couple parents ask us about graduation. Has there been a decision where this year's graduation will take place? There was some issue last year moving to Wolstein and then to LC. We spent $22,000-ish. It didn't solve a ton of issues. I've heard a lot of complaints about the ceremony being there. Will you consider moving it back here to George Daniel? It's been a tradition for decades.
That's a new business discussion I know we have coming up.
Okay. I think we're going to discuss that tonight.
Okay. My other question is, will you make a motion, Mr. Ballard, to replace scholars with students?
Okay, thank you for that.
Someone seconded that. Can we vote?
Sounds like you already have.
On a more serious level, numerous policies, district policies, have been changed under the last CEO. When there has been public records requests to ask, or even just a regular conversation with a human being, how did those policies, come into existence? There was no discussion or little to no discussion. Will you look at those? Will those be changed back to our old policies? Is there any discussion?
Yeah, at this point in time, that will be up to the CEO under House Bill 70 rules, but I guess we just need to kind of look through them to see the changes, because as you can see, it's very reasonable, and if it's a reasonable change, I'm sure we'll take a look at that. Don't let me speak for it.
Yeah, and I don't know what was done specifically by the past CEO. I can't comment to that. But I can tell you that we belong to a service through the Ohio School Boards Association, and they advise us on policy change as laws change. As the legislature changes things. Sometimes it's even federal law that changes, that mandates that you have to, it trickles down to the school board level. And we have a lady that takes care of that. I just met with her yesterday, I think it was Friday, and I was impressed with her. I mean, she is on top of things, and that's the process that's been used here for many, many years. And I don't think that process changed when the CEO came in and you were under House Bill 70. So I think we're doing the same thing we've always done, Barbie, and I think that the only policies that have been changed, I would guess, would be those that have been recommended by the state, where the state has told us to keep up to snuff, that we had to make those change. Couldn't swear to that, but those changes are usually mandated by recommended by OSBA, and they're really mandated by other policy changes at the state or the federal level. So can't speak to that specifically because I don't know all the changes that have been made. But after my conference with Heidi the other day, I felt pretty good about policy. One, that we're keeping up, because sometimes that's a struggle for school districts, and two, that we have a process in place that's been the same process for many, many years. My gut tells me that we haven't deviated from that we've stayed true to that process, which I think is a good one. I will tell you this, we are working on this. I have a meeting on Wednesday with one of our employees about getting that back up on the website. We want to make sure that you all have access to the policies and that they're on the website. Right now they're not. I think there's some kind of an issue or somewhere the process is broken down, but I'm talking to one of our employees on Wednesday, I think Wednesday afternoon, to talk about that, and we'll get that updated. It's one of my priorities, is to make sure that number one, the policy is updated, and I'm confident that it has been, and two, that we get it on the website so that all of you could check those policies whenever you needed to. We're working on that.
So I'll say in a normal world, he would have been absolutely correct. But in the world that we're just coming out of, there has been a lot of policy changes that were done here from a local place. But I do believe Heidi has kept track with every one of those changes.
And let me say this, please, through the chair. We have different practices, but not necessarily policy changes. The only way board policy can change is the board changes its policy. So what's happened is people have not followed board policy. You're absolutely right. Our policy is the same as it's always been. And so what happened, it's almost like an executive pin. So the past CEO changed procedures, but never went through the process. There's a way in which we change policies, our attorney can share with you. We have to make the change. It has to be posted for so long. They check to see if it is in compliance with the law. So we have not had an official board policy change, and the CEO does not have to change board policy. I think Mr. Giardini, he can simply change behavior, do things. So
Can I say something, and maybe this will help in the answer? So there was an issue last year through the chair to Mrs. Nazario. Do you recall what I'm speaking of? The policy, we requested information with, I believe it was LaKimbre Brown. She was the person that got back with us.
Check about
the policy change.
They came up with a policy within I asked for why wasn't a employee removed from the school when a teacher would have been removed from the school if they did the same thing. Police were brought in and whatnot. She said there's a policy. I asked to see the policy, and nothing. She was going to email it to me immediately. 4 or 5 hours later, I emailed her, I'm sending it right over, and it came. You can tell she made it up right then. It was like a paragraph. She sent it over. So I think that's the policy type of thing.
But I know it doesn't sound right, but I have seen a stack of the policy changes that's happened under the CEO model. And we've just got to go back to Heidi and see if those have been officially changed in our handbook but there's actually a stack of policy changes that we need to address.
So,
yes.
Through the chair to
Yes, sir.
Mr. Williams, you're both right. What Mr. Ring is referring to is that the district has for years subscribed to a service that recommends policy change to our formal policies to make sure that we're staying consistent with changes in state law and federal law, which happen often. And it sounds like that has remained in place, and we're getting our policies updated based on that. Then there are local policies that aren't mandated by the state government that a superintendent or a school board might want to adopt for one reason or another. Under House Bill 70, the CEO had the authority to act as the board and essentially create those new policies. What procedure he followed for doing that, I don't know. The example that was just given sounds to me like it's not the procedure that we used to follow, which was there was a policy review committee that actually sat down and looked at locally generated policies, or maybe the teachers suggested a change in policy, or administrators did because something wasn't working right. And it was a group of people, maybe 8, 9, 10 people were on that committee, and they would get the proposed policy, they would discuss it, debate it, and then make a recommendation back to the school board as to whether or not it should be adopted. Whether or not that procedure has continued to be followed or not, I don't know. I simply don't know. Or if it was something more with just a fewer number of people. And then there's practices, which is a third category, which is, okay, it's not a formal policy, but I've decided I'm going to implement this policy by using this practice or that practice. And so while the policy may not have changed, the practice in terms of how that policy was implemented may have changed. That's a much less formal, oftentimes was dependent upon the superintendent and how he or she viewed things. So we're probably all right here. Everyone has probably experienced something that we're calling a policy change that may or may not have been. Hopefully, all of them have been kept in a book, and we'll know whether or not a policy has changed or a new policy has been added. And then we can get it up to date, and then Mr. Ring, in reviewing them, can decide whether or not that policy that was created was a good idea or a bad idea, and Mr. Ring may follow his own procedure for doing that, like using a committee to bounce things off of and so forth. But it was, I used to go to some of those policy meetings. They were very good. It was really spirited debate, and usually we ended up with a pretty good policy out of it.
Whatever the term might be, if it's practices, policies, ideas, I encourage Mr. Ring and your team to comb through those at the very least. One last thing, pretty simple. Of the review that was just released, I just asked the board to question why it took 9 months for the State Department of Education to release the findings, considering they knew that we weren't doing our best for our children.
So I'm now going to ask our state rep to come because he does have a bit of an update for us that he wanted to share, or that we need him to share.
Well, thank you for having me through the chair to we got the board, we have the ADC, we have an interim CEO all sitting down here. I saw smiles when I walked in. That was nice. You have good hands in your law director and your education attorney. It looks to me like we've got the groundwork. Let's go back to where local control can work. And one of the things that I believe wholeheartedly is the group that I've got to know here circled around this table. They care about Lorain children, they care about the Lorain community, and they care about public education. And when those things are your first and foremost goal, you will tend to work together. So one of the things that makes a successful educational thing, and I'm excited to see Mr. Ring, our CEO, superintendent, whatever title they want to give him, he's one who's going to collaborate with you, he's going to communicate with you, and he's going to be very transparent. I'm hoping. I believe everything I know about him that to be the case. So with that being said, as you dive into the mess, the disaster zone, the best practices that were based on disruption and deception and fear and what have you, and mayhem that was brought by the past CEO, I think there's a chance now for you to get in there and find out what's going on. So that leads me to my question that doesn't have to be answered here and now. But I was contacted by board members, community members, ADC members regarding records requests that were not being fulfilled. So our office did a records request, and many of my colleagues were shocked that when the state rep office asked for records from a public entity, every single line item was denied. And that right there is a big red flag that misdeeds and missteps were being taken. So my office is here to help. I will do whatever it takes to assist. At the same time, while I'm on the other track, trying to get a repeal and replace of HB 70. You let me know where we need to go with that, with the records request. I believe now you're in a place where you'll be able to see all that has happened. I will follow up on that audit and see what I can find out as well down in Columbus, what the auditor's office schedule and calendar looks like. Hopefully you'll beat me to it. I'm hoping that means that their auditor's office is in contact and is helpful as well. As for where we're at, I can look at the glass is half full and say, hey, I think things are moving in the right direction, or I could look at it as half empty and say that we have got out of the House a bill that was going to get those wraparound services to be supportive of a locally controlled Board of Education and a superintendent chosen by that board to lead in a collaborative effort for the success of students. It was stymied in the House, in the Senate. It's been pretty much shoveled away to the side in the Senate. And we are now just in the last month before we went to break, had a very productive meeting where things and dynamics are changing in the Senate. I hope for the good. And what I mean by that is a lot of us sat down, a lot of interested parties, a lot of the people that were on the bill, myself and others in the Senate sat down, and we said, these are the things that must happen to make this a good bill and for it to be accepted in a bipartisan way that still does good by our children. And of course, as you know, the sausage making of legislation is sometimes disgusting to eat. And I'm going to have to swallow some things that I would never agree to alone and on face value. But I think it'll allow us to return this local control, and it'll get some support for a lot of the social determinants that impact education. So with that being said, Senator Peggy Lehner, the education chair, has in her possession a bill that Republicans in the Senate Ed Committee and Democrats in the Senate Ed Committee and myself and my joint sponsor in the House agree with. That's a good sign. Now they have to determine what are they going to do with the other 4 Republican senators who are against it, or maybe not there yet, and will we get it out of the Senate floor or onto the Senate floor, and then how will the Senate vote on it? If things go well, we could be looking at something at the governor's desk by spring break. That's the ultimate goal. That gives you more time to work on a full-time CEO being now a superintendent being hired. And I think that's where our goal is, that's where our vision is, to get local control back. If there's any questions, I'll field them. I'll leave my card. You all have my cell. You have everything you need from me. I've been in contact with just about everybody around the table here. Please let me know, let my office know if we can be of any assistance as you move forward. I wish you the best of luck. This is a good 2020 start. What I see here is success waiting to happen. I hope good best practices happen, and I hope policies are put in place that will continue to move Lorain forward in a way that the children are going to be successful, the community is going to be supportive, and the educational leadership from teachers on up will be supported as well. So thank you, and I'll field questions, or I'll be glad to head to my next meeting. Great. I love no questions. Thank you so much. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you for all you do. Appreciate it. So at this point, if there's no other from the, thank you, Joe.
Hi, my name's Rhonda Lurisha. I'm a taxpayer here in Lorain, also a teacher here in Lorain, so I have a lot that's important to me in the schools. I also teach second grade. I teach the kids that are learning how to read. And one of the problems I've had this year is this wit and wisdom. And putting Haggerty on top of it is like two wrongs trying to make a right. It doesn't work that way. We have a program already in place called Foundations. It addresses phonemic awareness. It addresses phonics and every part of it. The problem is it's not coordinated with wit and wisdom. We've made do. We figured it out. The kids are learning how to read. Every one of my students can read this year. I don't think adding another program is going to help us. It's money that's being spent unnecessarily, like it sounds like it's been done a lot this year. I have a question. I heard a rumor this morning that my principal was being sent to another building for half of the day. And it turned out to be true, because she was gone for half the day and sent to another building. I guess I want to know why and who made that decision, and what does that do to our building? Can anyone tell me?
We did have a transition of a principal from one building to another building, actually now serving as a dean. And in the short term, we've asked one of our principals to oversee 2 buildings, and that's probably what you're referring to right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll continue to look at that and see if there's someone qualified to step into the principal position that is open right now. But on the short term, we had to do something. We wanted to give both buildings support, or the building where the principal was moved out of their position. We wanted to make sure that we had principal support there. So on the short term, we have done a split, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
We'll continue to look at that and see if there is a better answer in terms of finding someone that could complete the year on an interim basis as a principal of Jacinto.
Yeah, I'm hoping to keep Chantel right where she is, because she's very successful.
Yeah.
We work well together. We have an outstanding building that you can see by our grades and our numbers and our results. It works. And we don't want to take on somebody else's reject. That's not what we need in our building. So, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, having no others, we're going to suspend the rules to go into an executive session.
Motion to suspend the order to go into executive session?
Second.
Roll call. Let me say first that we're going in for A2, which is employment, and litigation C, were the 2 reasons we're going in. Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
And now a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
We're going in executive session. Not sure if we're going to be taking any votes coming out, but if you guys are gone, you have a good night. Thank you. I need a motion to come out of executive session.
Support?
Roll call.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
We're back on track. Back to number 6, approval of, consider approval of the December 23rd meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Nazario?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? And Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Is there any old business? Hearing none. Report of the treasurer. Do you have anything?
Nothing at this time.
Nothing at
I
this
do-
time?
Oh, the tax, oh, sorry, the tax budget.
Okay. Share with me.
Yeah, it was just this.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the proposed tax budget 2020, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Roll call?
Ms. Nazario? Yes. Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Report and recommendations of the CEO. Do you have anything, sir? Take your time. They've been waiting for this.
Yeah, just a few reports. Just as I have said all along, I have started my building visits. I have my first one today. We'll continue doing that. Should be done by the end of January, where I'm sitting down with any employee that wants to talk to me. So I have commenced that. The other piece of it is that probably the first week in February, I'm in the process of setting up some community meetings, and I probably will do 3 at each one of the middle schools, from like 6 to 7:30, something like that, to give people an opportunity to come in and ask questions and make comments, because again, that's part of the collaborative process that I said that I would use. So just an FYI, and we will publish those dates, of course, on the website and make sure that people know if and when those things happen. We did have one resignation from a parapro that has been accepted. We did hire a new football coach. James Boyas is coming to us. Worked extensively at the college level for several years, then came into the high school level, has head coaching experience, currently is at Garfield Heights as an assistant coach. And we had a committee of 5 people. I believe Steve was on that committee that worked with our athletic director. And based on their vetting of the process and going through that, they came to me, Brian came to me with a recommendation. I asked to interview the gentleman by myself, and he came in, and one evening we spent a little time together and continued that vetting process. And based on all of those recommendations, primarily from the committee and my time with the gentleman, I have go ahead and approved a contract, a supplemental contract for head football coach. So I know that's something that all the sports fans particularly are something that they're interested in. Each year we do a approval of a contract with the Lorain Port Authority for use of the Black River Landing Transportation Center building for our art show. We approved that, so that's been taken care of. We also approved a contract with the Applewood Centers to provide special education and certain related services. Again, that's an annual expenditure. Applewood is a great resource for us to have to help some of our kids that really struggle with some different things. We approved professional development for our preschool staff in the area of resuscitation and some training that may be a required training for them to have that. We've approved that. Another certification for our welding program for Daniel Gross, some certification that he needed to get. And lastly, approval of a contract with LCCC for our College Credit Plus and My University program. The costs will not go up, same price we've had in the past, which is $41.64 per credit hour per student. Courses that are co-taught by LC college faculty with a high school teacher as a supplemental instructor, they charge a little more for. That's at $52.50 per credit hour. We're charged at that. And courses taught where kids actually leave us and go to LC and take courses there. We do get a discounted rate at $80 per credit. Again, so we've approved that. And again, there's no increase in any of those. We appreciate the partnership we have with the community college and the great job that they do with our students, whether they be right here on our own campus or for those that choose to go out there. So, Mr. Ballard, I think that's all I want to share with you right now. I think that capsulizes number 9, 10, and 11 on the board agenda.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Just one. The football coach, is he also going to be teaching at the high school or somewhere in the district? Is there any?
I'm sure he will be. I believe his certifications in special education, that's a good one to have. It seems like we're always looking for special educators, so I anticipate, we haven't crossed that bridge yet, Mr. Williams, but in our conversations, we want to prioritize, get him in, number one, get him into the district, and hopefully it'll work out that he can work at the high school so that he's close to his players, and we know how influential those people can be when they're around the student body.
It's good.
Okay, thank you. Is there any new business? New business, anyone?
Yes, there were a couple. One was, there was a partial discussion of it earlier. That's around this review. And if at all possible, through the CEO and the chair and the Distress Commission, actually, perhaps we could arrange for, I think Claire was going to do the review. If maybe, since ODE did this review, it'd be great if we had a representative come in and present that review to us. That way, I appreciate Mr. Pickering, bringing it in, and we've kind of read some of it in the Chronicle, but if we could have that formal presentation where we can direct our questions directly to them, and that gives, if we present it, they might think we're biased, So again, ODE, they did the review, they authorized the review, it's their review of us, and I think that would be wonderful. And plus, we haven't had an engaged conversation with them in a few years, so it'd be nice to have them back at our meeting again, and perhaps that could be, we can invite the commission to that meeting, do that together. So
Or
that would
invite you
be-
to their meeting.
or either way, whichever comes first, or however it works with the schedule for the folks in Columbus,
I
yes.
can work on that. Be talking to her Thursday.
When is your all's next meeting?
We haven't.
Haven't
heard
scheduled?
anything
Okay.
About that, so.
Very good.
Give a great opportunity to schedule it,
I
right?
think it's sometime in February, but
It's
there's no,
supposed to be,
but there's
so
no specific
no
date.
finalized date yet.
Okay. We're down to our second hearing of the public.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, there was one other.
Okay, sorry.
That we wanted to discuss, and that's commencement. So if we could share with Mr. Ring, anybody can jump in here, because we all got the same questions or concerns, or how do we get to the place that we're going to have commencement at?
I think we're at that time when you're probably considering commencement and all that, and maybe that's just the time to actually come in and maybe have a conversation with them and just see where.
Well, that's actually supposed to be decided this week.
So I guess I'm coming to see you in a day or so.
I mean, they want to know who's saying, I mean, my wife asked me these questions, so I'll ask them. I mean, they want to know who the board president is. Okay, we know who that is now. They want to know whose other signature's going to go in there. Like both your signatures goes on those.
Correct.
This and that. And then there's always, they want to know where it's going to be.
We want to know. I mean, it's
Yeah,
we.
has something been set, or are we going to go back to, I mean, traditionally, I'd rather go back to the traditional way.
I never had a problem. In 7 years, I did it in our George Daniel and in the gymnasium if need be. I mean, it was never an ideal situation in the gym, but we made it work, and I think it should be at home.
And it wasn't ideal last year at the college.
Well,
It was
the gym
$20,000.
that we have is bigger. I mean,
Right.
that gym, if you set it right, says 3,200, and if there's overflow, you can always use the big screen. It sets another 850 in the auditorium, if it's handled correctly.
And I think the other.
Right, that's the key.
Another big question was, so we have a tradition of, like every district or school does, how they do commencement. And at one time, probably 7 or 8 years ago, we discussed changing location. But any decisions like that isn't a decision that, even if a board has the authority to make, that it just makes. We've got to communicate with our community. And I learned this because I was part of driving the conversation about maybe looking at someplace different because of the logistics. And what I realized, what I've learned is that was a perspective from someone who didn't graduate from the school district. And so it's sometimes easy for folks who are from outside to start making suggestions about traditions that they really haven't weighed in on and appreciate. So it's a value thing, and so there are good reasons why the tradition is what it is. And I think before we just radically change that, we'd have to get buy-in. I think last year it got kind of crazy because first it was going to be at Wolstein, which was a radical difference, right? And then it ended up being somewhere else. But none of these decisions were a part of a conversation of values and importance that were had. And so I think that's important. If we're going to ever make a change like that, that change needs to be vetted in a way that gets real buy-in from the community, where you explain to them why we're making this change and all those pieces. And that just didn't happen. So we feel like our commencement got hijacked, quite frankly. And that's what our community feels like. So, and it was a $22,000 cost, I believe, associated with it, or something, or $15,000, some number.
It was at the college.
It was at the college,
Yes.
yeah. But then, and the field for the community and this board is to come back home. And that's
So
the
perhaps
conversation
some
we should
folks
have.
you could maybe get together, a small group of people to just discuss that. They could fill you in on what happened. I'm sure there are folks in operations who could discuss some of their rationale. We just weren't aware of it.
And I would even recommend, too, reaching out to Tim Jama, who was at the high school, who did a lot of the structuring of those types of things to give you some clarity as far as how the mechanics of a graduation would work.
And are we in a contract with a group right now that we don't even, we very well could be, I
Right.
don't know. So those are the.
I'll find out.
On your list.
Is that it for new business?
Is that- I think so.
Is there anything further from the public? Last hearing of the public.
Do we know who was handling the public records request once it was changed to the public records request email?
We have just changed that process to the treasurer's office. So the public records email, I can't remember exactly what it is, Barbie, but that actually goes to Eden. She's the keeper of the keys there. And that starts the process in the treasurer's office. So in the past, it was going, I think, through HR and then to the CEO. We've stopped that. That's going to go back to the traditional way that we've done it, and it's going to go through the treasurer's office. And, as I need to be brought in, or Mr. Attorney Giardini needs to be brought in, we'll do that, because sometimes you need an extra set of eyes on those requests to make sure that they're appropriate and so forth. But they're going through the treasurer's office, and Eden's really our key person, our first person that sees the request and starts the process.
Thank you. So to clarify, it went to Yonkers' office when it was changed?
I think so.
That's HR?
Help me out.
And it went to the email, and Mr. Hardy he was in charge of fulfilling with the help of others, but he was the ultimate say of if it could be sent or not.
Okay. Could he be held responsible for not fulfilling the request in a reasonable amount of time?
A question for our attorney.
It's really the district's obligation to provide you with records, not a specific individual's. So probably not.
All right, thank you. Question about the policy. Board policy states that the grades are A, B, C, D, F, and we have standards-based grading. Has there been any communication about possibly changing that or changing the policy officially, or where are we with that?
Certainly something we're talking about as I'm in visits today. As I mentioned, I was in a building. It was one of the topics that came up, and we'll continue to look at that. I think really the smart thing to do is to bring some teachers together, the appropriate administrators, to talk about what's appropriate. That's something I hate to change midstream on, to be honest with you, as your superintendent/CEO. As you're in the middle of the school year, I'm hesitant to make any quick changes on something like that, simply because of processes that are in place, including the actual structure of the report card, which they're not easy to make. But I do tell you that there'll be a discussion, and there could be changes next year. That'll be up to the district.
Okay, thank you. Another question, the budget, you have spoke about before, but not really in this venue where it'll reach more people. We're approximately 2.5 million spending under Hardy than we are bringing in, and 6 million-ish for next year, how do you plan on cutting that?
Right, based on the 5-year forecast, and it's a forecast, but your figures are accurate, Mrs. Washington. And, that's part of the conversations that we're having, is to see where we can make reductions, comparing the size of our staff against districts that are similar to ours in terms of socioeconomic as well as size. Sometimes that's a good guidance, but every district's different. And you have to be careful making conclusions just based on statistics. So we'll continue to look at that, and I would think in the near future we'll have a proposal to share with the board and move ahead with that. But it's my intent to make some reductions. I don't think we can't sustain a $6 million deficit going into next year. The year after that, I don't remember the number, maybe Tia, you do, but it's probably higher than that. So anything that we can do now to save some dollars in terms of our budget, then that's going to behoove the district for several years down the road.
Thank you. Last question. There were some changes being made for the elementary level building leaders, and I ask you to please look into the leadership at the high school. Scheduling is crazy. There's kids that aren't receiving what they need, and also Johnny Wilson. There's been 20 employees that have left under the current building principal there.
Okay. So, having no more from the public, I guess our next board meeting will be on the 27th at 5 o'clock. Does anyone have anything further for the good of the order?
I would just like to say it's refreshing to be at a board meeting and have the CEO here. So I'm sure Diane shares the same sentiment that I do. Whether it was an executive session, this environment, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you. 27th at 5 o'clock. Seeing nothing else, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Nazaria? Yes. Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.